We're live from the CNN News 18 primetime studio, brought to you by Green Lamb Laminates. Viewers, now on to talking about something a little more reflective. And we can do so tonight because it's the last day of the 2024 year that has been quite consequential in many different ways. Prime Minister Narendra Modi's leadership is centered, as we all know, on a strong nationalist agenda. Like Indira Gandhi, Modi has been able to connect with the masses. He has the ability to transcend mainstream media and strike a rapport directly and particularly with the youth, women and backward classes. He's done this by leveraging technology. Much of it means that Modi has inveigled himself in the life of his constituents, unlike prime ministers before him. The tech platform he's built is fast becoming a model for the rest of the world to follow. Modi's economic policies have also been a significant departure from those of his predecessors. Not only a strong emphasis upon welfarism, but Modi's implemented initiatives like Make in India and Digital India, which aim to boost economic growth and make India a self-reliant hub for manufacturing and technology. Not that others haven't tried, viewers, but there have been certain innovations. Furthermore, Modi's foreign policy approach has been more assertive than previous governments. He's taken a strong stance on issues like terrorism and national security and has worked to strengthen India's relationships with other nations, some that were beyond the strategic vision of previous prime ministers. There's a whole chart of countries that many prime ministers never visited in decades altogether. However, Modi's leadership has also been criticized for being overbearing, and some have said it is divisive. His government has been accused of eroding democratic institutions and promoting a Hindu nationalist agenda that excludes minority groups. Whether this is right or wrong, viewers, doesn't quite matter, because that's a perception amongst a certain group of people. The BJP has chosen to dismiss these allegations as unfounded propaganda. But nonetheless, Modi is seen by many as a riposte to Nehruvian liberalism in all senses of the term. So let's now, viewers, debate Modi's leadership style and ask some basic questions. And I want to open us to a very distinguished panel this evening. We have with us Pavan Verma, who's an author. We have with us Mr. Vinay Sahasrabudhe, who heads a very important think tank, which is part of the government. And also, we have with us Dr. Anand Ranganathan to give us perhaps an enlightened citizen's perspective. So let me first begin by asking Mr. Sahasrabudhe a basic question, which will sort of set up this debate. Mr. Sahasrabudhe, there's a whim, many say, that the Prime Minister has brought to the job. A sense of urgency. The PMO never tires of telling us, of informing us about the selfless, holidayless toil of the Prime Minister. He's an advert for that 24/7 model that Narayan Murthy keeps talking about. There's also an attention to detail and a, how should one put it, a concentration of decision making. What do you make of this style? It differs certainly from quite a few other prime ministers. Is it beneficial? Will it prove to be beneficial as we go forward? Or does this amassing of power in the authority of one person mean that the BJP itself and perhaps the government itself is not creating what is known as a bench strength? How do you see it?
No, I don't think there is anything about not creating the bench strength. In fact, Prime Minister Modi happens to be one of the great motivator. I mean, people look at him and get motivated abundantly. And if you are talking about his being workaholic, a 24/7 Prime Minister, it is because governance with a specific purpose of delivering democracy to the people, it's something which has first been brought on the agenda in a very prominent manner. And BJP government largely being a one-party government, not so much of a coalition government, of course, not this term, not this tenure, but otherwise, unlike Atalji's problems, Prime Minister Modi is free from all those obstacles, and therefore he is ensuring that democracy is delivered, development backlog is cleared, and people are made to aspire to take India to the 2047 dream of India becoming a developed country. So he is very purposive, he is working with a particular mission kind of a sense in his mind. He has a specific agenda. People have umpteen number of times endorsed his ideas, and he has also evolved as a thought leader. Look at the concept of women-led development, something very new. It takes the discourse around gender beyond just women empowerment. He is putting women as the vanguard of the journey towards development, which is a message to the traditional chauvinist men as well at the same time. And therefore, his creative mind, his plethora of ideas that he has mooted, and on the one hand, he has emerged as a thought leader. On the other hand, he has established himself as a very, very successful implementer.
Okay. Pavan Verma, where do you come in on this?
Thank you, Rahul. Let me wish all your viewers a very happy new year, and to say that this is the time for positivity and not negativity as we step into the new year. Now, the evaluation of Mr. Modi and his leadership is a very complex issue, which should be seen not in absolute black and white polarities, like any reasoned assessment, but I think more in an evaluatory framework of mind. I think that he has brought in as Prime Minister this year and through his previous 10 years and more, certain positive features to both governance and leadership. Among his positive features is one you mentioned yourself, the stress on focused welfareism, the Jan Dhan Yojana and its expansion, the push on infrastructure, certain very important reforms such as RERA and the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code. I think that the rapid digitization that has happened, and please, I don't want to link it as a consequence of demonetization, but the rapid digitization that has happened under his watch is a plus point, definitely. On foreign policy, and I speak from my head as a foreign diplomat, I think he has many pluses, including in a linked sector, which is strengthening our defense sector, and in particularly its border infrastructure. Now, these are broadly, I think, some of his major achievements. I could have missed a few. On the flip side of the coin, I think Mr. Modi's current assessment must bear in mind that there has been growing and unsustainable inequality, economic inequality during his 10 years. Some of it is inevitable in any society. Some of it could have been handled better. For instance, many surveys tell us that the number of the absolutely poor, those who earn less than $2 a day, have gone up very substantially, and according to one survey, from 60 million or so in 2020 to 134 million in 2024. Now, of course, we had COVID and other setbacks, but it's an alarming figure. On the other hand, the incomes of the very rich have grown. We have now the world's third largest number of billionaires, and equally the largest number of the unacceptably poor, whose incomes have not risen by more than 1% in the last 5 years. So there is the question A of the growing inequality and the inability of economic policy under his watch in some measure to rectify this. The second, I think, flip side of his term has been on jobs. Now, this again is not a problem any prime minister can resolve quickly or easily, but it is a problem which has grown manifold. I mean, today we have a situation where the percentage of those who are jobless in the ages between 18 and 24 is the highest ever. According to the government itself, its data, there were 22 crore jobs for which people applied, of which 7.2 lakh people got the jobs.
Right.
It is an issue that 12.5 crore jobs were lost in the last 8 years. So, joblessness, I think inequality and some degree of focus, Rahul.
Yeah.
When you evaluate Prime Minister's leadership on education, it's very important. We are producing as part of our demographic dividend more and more unemployable people without focusing on primary education and education. Now, these are areas I think we should concentrate. So, the last point I want to make as an opening remark is that Prime Minister Modi has been successful as a political leader, even a charismatic political leader. But somewhere I think he has failed to make the transition from a successful political leader to a statesman of a republic. And here comes the question which you flagged yourself of the increasing social divisiveness within society,
Right.
which perhaps was avoidable.
Okay. Let me bring in the citizen's perspective, so to speak. Dr. Ranganathan, when I talk to some of my friends who are not involved in journalism or in academia, etc., they're lay people, so to speak, they think that the Prime Minister imparts a sense of security, a sense of assuredness, maturity maybe even, and has a certain agenda. Therefore, the country gets a certain sense of being shepherded towards a particular goal. There's generally a sense of direction. How do you parse the Prime Minister's 10 years in office?
Good evening, Rahul, and good evening to my fellow panelists. Wishing everyone a very happy new year. It's a real pleasure to be amongst Vinayji and Pawanji, such luminaries, and of course you. May I slightly disagree with Pawanji when he said that assessing Modi is a very complex thing. For me, and I speak as a citizen, as you said, you've already thrust upon me that responsibility. For me, it is absolutely easy. I see Modi as a great performer, but not a great reformer. And I think that has been the story of the last 10 years. It has been wish we had been something else. And I say this as someone who all of us love India. The direction is absolutely right. India's direction is right. It has been set right. And you're right about Modi taking us in the right direction. It is the speed with which he is taking us is what I disagree with in terms of I have problems with. And I'll explain to you 3 or 4 things. He is a great status quoist. He's a great administrator. And I would say one of the greatest decisions after independence was made by him to vaccinate 1 billion people twice over within a year is absolutely tremendous achievement. There are so many other achievements, social as well as administrative, financial, of course, CAA, 370, whatever. But he has not taken the toughest decisions that needed to catapult us to what Vinayji says, developed country by 2047. Please let us remember that great strides have been made since 2014. Just to give you a couple of examples, our GDP per capita in 2014 was 1,500 USD. Today it is 2,600 USD. So yes, we've made great strides. Our forest reserves were 300 billion. Today they are 700 billion. In the last 1 year, we've also made great strides. I mean, we've made 5 or 6 things. GDP For example, GST collections monthly highest ever. Our number of jobs last year highest ever, 47 million. Our manufacturing index highest ever. Inflation low, 5-year low of 3.5%. Although these things fluctuate over a period of a year, but I'm saying it, progress has been made. These are administrative progresses. Delivery is fantastic. Welfare schemes are fantastic. So where would I like Modi to take the decisions? Farm laws. That is where 300 million Indians are employed. 44% of our active labor force is employed in a sector that contributes only 14% to the GDP. It is unacceptable. And we have 260 lakh crores of debt. The status quo as far as PSUs are concerned, the status quo as far as no reforms in agricultural sector are concerned, the status quo as if, and I'm not going to the social issues, the Hindu, issues that have not been addressed. So let's put it this way, things would have been so much better, had Modi taken the tough, he did take the tough decisions. I mean, farm laws were taken, but he repealed them. He did take the tough decision on many other occasions, but then either there was a delay, for example, notification of CAA, or, for example, land reforms, act was junked, farm laws were junked. So I would say he's a great status quoist, and I mean it as a compliment, because even that in today's environment is probably a good thing. But let me end by saying this, that he's blessed in a way in the kind of opposition he has, because in all the decisions that he has taken for national interests, the opposition has been against him. And all the decisions that he has taken against national interests, the opposition is with him. Repealing farm laws, not doing any privatization, so on and so forth. So he's blessed in a way.
Okay, Mr. Sahasrabudhe, look, there are two basic broad adjectives that have been used. A politician, a great politician, not quite the statesman, a performer but not quite the reformer. So those are two sort of negative interpretations of his persona as a leader. But there are people who will of course say at the end of the day that, look, fundamentally, there are certain things that we expected from the Prime Minister that haven't come true. And now let's look at 2025. Do you see the Prime Minister sort of closing the gap? We do need somebody who can rise above the daily transactionalism of politics that we are witnessing. And this is creating a stalemate in the citadel of our democracy, which is Parliament. Are we going to see perhaps somebody rise to the occasion and say, look, we have to move away from identity-based politics in the long term? Will we see those steps being taken, whether it is quotas or whether it is, the normal, what they say, Hindu, Muslim, etc., etc.? And are we going to see those real big reforms which somehow have been tucked under the carpet, which are becoming now the need of the hour?
Well, I don't think there is any reason to get unduly perturbed by whatever has happened in the Parliament or has been happening in the Parliament, because the opposition has a particular view, and the government certainly would not like opposition tantrums to be kind of ignored, and therefore these things continue to happen. But the point I would like to make over here is, because you have made two propositions, I mean, they came from two learned panelists over here. One is that he is not a great statesman. I humbly disagree with it. See, I mean, the way he has mooted the idea of South-South cooperation, it is about statesmanship. If you look into the external affairs related issues, or within the country also, I mean, we promised that we would be conducting elections in Jammu and Kashmir, and we did that, and a different government came to power, but there was kind of no kind of politics played around that, and the government is now safely in the saddle over there. At the same time, the way we have won over people who are troublemakers, let's say, let's take the example of the Naxal issue. I mean, today, Naxal-related violence is almost at its, never in the past it was at this stage earlier. Similarly, we have a fairly peaceful Northeast. I agree there are some problems in Manipur, but still, And another example of his being a reformer, because my learned friend said that he is a status quoist. I think it's a left-hand kind of compliment, because he said even status quoist also had some great virtues about it. But I believe a person who has been struggling all along to bring transformations while he was in Gujarat and now here as well, the way implementation mechanism is working, producing results, I mean, nobody had imagined that these things could happen in our country, and he has ensured that they happen, and with the same kind of bureaucracy, with the same kind of rules and regulations, but he had made people work. Have you ever thought of Karma Yogi kind of a scheme and a campaign wherein you are instilling some motivation amongst the bureaucrats so that they deliver? He has made it happen. Let's take the example of the simultaneous elections related reforms which are now on the annual. So, I mean, nobody had ever thought that this can happen, but now he is going to make it happen. So, he is a person who is not going to be happy with status quoism. He wants to do away with all these rotten things in our polity which are there. He has been talking from the rooftop about bringing at least 1 lakh plus young politicians in politics who do not have any family background as such. This aspiration, I mean, this resolve itself is of great importance. At the same time, about his statesmanship, I mean, there are umpteen number of examples. So, he is a statesman. Of course, one thing I would add before I close, that you expect only from a doer.
Right.
When in a family there is a karta, you expect something. Earlier we didn't have any karta at all. There were only families. We know.
That's a very interesting take. Pawan Verma, look, I want you to qualify this because, look, many people said he's not a political coalition builder, but he has clearly disproved everyone. Look at how he's managed the NDA, which is quite disparate at some levels, but he has shepherded it. Then they said he's not a social coalition builder because, you know, he sort of is going to only push a particular narrow Hindu agenda. But many people from different streams, walks, castes, etc. are alloyed today, not just to him, but to the BJP. He's not a delegator, but he has been able to build a GST sort of framework which allows for that kind of delegation. He's not a believer in parliamentarianism, but Parliament has passed record bills. There has also been a huge, what is that word? A huge concession given to the opposition by saying, okay, you have a problem with the Waqf bills, you have a problem with such and such. Let's form a task force in Parliament. Let's set it up. Let's talk it through. And I'll put these issues on the back burner till we build consensus. So, can you explain?
No, as I said, I don't want to have this debate on absolutely black and white extremes. He has good qualities and he has some negative qualities, and it's only fair to recognize them. You mentioned he's a person who was not comfortable in a coalition. I still maintain that. And let me say that a coalition government is not what he expected, but what he was forced to accommodate to, because that is not his style of functioning. It is leadership oriented but authoritarian. In Gujarat, we saw that he was not exceptionally sensitive to criticism from his own colleagues within his party. He neglected the Gujarat Assembly and treated it perfunctorily. And within his own cabinet also, if I may perhaps be allowed to add a fairly reliable anecdotal evidence, he does not like people who do not readily agree with him, although when he has to, he does carry them along. And when I say he is less than tolerant to criticism, you must understand that facts bear it out. I mean, under his watch, there have been 5,128 cases filed under the draconian UAPA Act. which can pick up anyone, put them in jail without bail endlessly. The process becomes the punishment, Rahul. You know that. There are 300 plus sedition cases, and you may be surprised, a very large percentage of them are for statements made critical of the Prime Minister, and coincidentally, the second person who figures in the largest number in that list is Chief Minister Yogi Adityanath of UP. So, it's about, when you say he's a coalition builder, consensus builder, tolerant to criticism, carrying people along, I will not make this as one of his great positive traits.
Okay.
Similarly, in terms of social consensus, if I may add, just please allow me, there is no doubt that he was, and rightly so for what he did, a Hindu Hriday Samrat. There is nothing wrong in it. I have perhaps written over half a dozen books on the greatness of Hinduism.
Right.
But having said that, I think he was not able to adequately build a consensus in a country which ab initio intrinsically is multicultural, multi-ethnic, multi-religious, although held together by one civilizational framework. So these are qualities you must look at and give a fair assessment.
Okay, so that is what Pawan Verma says he's doing, Dr. Ranganathan. But are we confusing two terms, authoritarian, and perhaps blurring the lines between authoritarianism and an authority figure? You know, they're two different things. One person is sort of, yeah, go ahead. Is that the mistake that we are making here?
Yes, I think principally it has to do with the fact that Modi is as much authoritarian as our constitution and our laws that are draconian allow him to be. As authoritarian as Manmohan Singh, Sonia Gandhi, Rahul Gandhi, or any chief minister before him or after him or during him.
Or Nehru, for that matter, in some senses.
Nehru, in fact, I would say Nehru has been the biggest dictator of modern India. People just don't realize it because half the things that he did never even came to the fore. The point is, the constitution, the laws are draconian. Yes, Modi has not removed those laws. Yes, sedition laws exist. Yes, UAPA exists, that was formulated by Congress. Yes, Modi is not removing any of those. But to say, single out Modi as being authoritarian would be totally incorrect and not a correct reading of the picture, because every Prime Minister has used so much more of the same laws as Modi has. But I want to make a very small point out here, what Vinay said. I think, look, I think I like Modi. India likes Modi. Modi is good for India. But let me say one thing, there is an issue with Modi being immune to not criticism, because of course anyone, it's a free country, anyone can criticize, but not addressing the issues that people would like to address. And here I talk about press conferences or something. I mean, for example, let's take the two biggest issues. Let's talk about corruption. Has anybody asked Modi what happened to the promises on black money that he made? Why did he amend the FCRA Act to escape BJP's conviction? Why has he taken all the tainted figures into his party? These questions have never been answered by him over the last 10 years, and I think that's spectacular. Has anybody asked Modi why did he say in 2013 that a government has no business to be in business, and all in the last 10 years, the government has been more in the business of business than ever other government before? Nobody's asked him this. So the problem is, Modi might say, oh, I don't have, there is media is biased, but for heaven's sake, a Prime Minister has to answer these questions which common citizens like us demand an answer to. You can rationalize all your weaknesses, all your negativities can be rationalized. Oh, I don't do this, I don't do because of this. No, the fact remains, these are the issues that you promised, you have failed to deliver. Please answer them.
Okay. Mr. Sahasra Buddhe, there is this impression that, at least from a citizen's perspective, that Mr. Modi doesn't present himself in an unscripted, let's put it like that, environment for questioning. More spontaneous environment, let's put it like that. Is this true? Do you believe that he has been a little gun shy, so to speak, or camera shy, or question shy, or whatever it is?
No. I think it is far from the facts. I mean, he has given umpteen number of interviews and asked, very tough questions were also asked to him and he has answered them. Simply to conduct a press conference cannot be the only barometer of being open to all the questions. I mean, questions he has never avoided. Of course, people may have their own views, but I don't think there is any truth in the fact that he is question shy or anything of that kind. And one more thing I would like to mention over here, because Anand Ranganathanji was very vocal about that. But let me say that after all, you are in a competitive politics. So unless and until a ground is cleared for moving on into the reforms which people are expecting from him, like for example Mr. Ranganathan is expecting, you cannot just be gung-ho and move ahead in a very misadventurous kind of a manner. And therefore, with this simultaneous elections related reforms and several other reforms, there will be some kind of a level playing, common level playing ground kind of. And on that basis, I am sure in the days to come, many more reforms will come. But I stick to my first argument that after all, he being a doer, there is a room for us to expect from him, for the people also to expect from him. He represents the aspiring India because people can aspire and people can expect from him that he will deliver. And so far, I am sure people have been happy about his ability to deliver and they will continue to be happy.
Okay, Mr. Verma, you raised your hand and then I want to ask my final question of all three of you. So please keep it short. Thank you. I'm running out of time. Yes, go ahead.
I'll keep it very short. You see, when you say that Mr. Modi is there to answer questions, I understand the constraints of Mr. Sahasrabudhe. But let's be clear, a Prime Minister has to be there taking unscripted questions. It's not about, because he carries much more conviction when he does that and not a monologue given from a distance. Why has he not done so? Secondly, the level of political discourse in the country, I hold the opposition as responsible and in equal measure. But the Prime Minister is the Prime Minister of the country. So many times he is dipped below a certain level of mandatory statesmanship, that is, or neutrality or gravitas that is required from a Prime Minister. And thirdly, if there is a criteria to judge Mr. Modi, one is to compare him with previous Prime Ministers and to say that he is not different from any of them. That's a very negative rating. Mr. Modi came with an agenda and an absolute majority for 10 years as a man with a difference. If that is the case, please tell me honestly and ask your viewers, has under his tenure institutions which were meant to be independent been diluted or subverted or not? Have investigative agencies been used and directed against opposition parties in greater measure than before?
Well,
I'm not saying these deals did not happen before,
No,
but is Mr. Modi different? Is Mr. Modi different? If you are going to say, he's just like
here
Mr.
is the
Nehru
question.
was,
I understand where you're coming from.
Anand called the biggest dictator in his life.
No,
Therefore,
I understand where you're
I'm
coming
saying,
from. Yeah. No, I think this is, look, this is about now a degree of subjectivity, viewers, because it's difficult in a program like this to talk about the number of times governments were dismissed, or governors were dismissed, or appointed as political appointees, or censorship laws used, or amendments made that curtail freedoms. It's very difficult, but we have anecdotal evidence. We also have, of course, recorded evidence that brings those facts out. And somewhere one has to understand that, look, yes, we have had governments, and perhaps it's true of all governments in nature of power, that they look to control A, the narrative, B, the system. I think you can't really be a politician if you're an angel. I don't think it works that way. You have to be slightly, in some senses of the term, narcissistic.
You can't be an anchor if you're an angel.
Yeah, absolutely, maybe not. But I just want to ask a question, and this is a fundamental question. Most of the criticism that comes, because he is popularly elected, and a large number of people do elect him, want to vote for him, want to see him in power. His approval ratings are very high. for someone who's been in office for 11 years. So is there it's a difficult term to use, but a class bias that Mr. Modi has had to fight against for 11 years, Dr. Ranganathan? A class bias. It doesn't quite come, as people say, from those ranks that people have got used to seeing prime ministers come from, because we've actually had quite a, I'm sorry to say, elite representation.
I have never thought that could be the truth regarding Prime Minister Modi. I don't think people have not voted for him this time round as much as they did in the previous two terms elections because of class bias.
No, I'm not talking about that. I'm not talking about
Yeah.
the popular vote. I'm talking about the cognoscenti, the intelligentsia that seems to be very focused on the negatives of Mr. Modi. They're very parsimonious in their praise. Let's be very honest about this. I mean, you read any of the mainstream sort of so-called liberal newspapers, etc., you'll find a grudging sort of acceptance.
Yes, but then, then do you give weightage to that so-called intelligentsia? I absolutely don't. I, for one, don't think they're intelligent at all.
No, that's a different
They are
matter.
completely
I'm just saying,
biased.
is there a certain, he's not PLU enough for us. I mean, I see, look, I'm from the media, I understand, I'm part of newsrooms, etc. I do see there's a comfort level with certain leaders who speak a certain way, dress a particular way, are cosmopolitan in a particular way. And that sort of also inveigles itself in the way you sort of speak about them and write about them. I'm asking a very sort of delicate question here.
I would say if you look at a lot of other state leaders, of course, not central ones, who very comfortable with the media and vice versa, I would say class issue wouldn't come into it. I mean, you look at Mamata Banerjee, you look at, for example, down south, you look at Pinarayi Vijayan, you look at a host of others. If you're talking of education, if you're talking of other social strata, I don't think that comes into the equation, Rahul. But again, I mean, I might be wrong. I think Pawanji or Vinayji might be able to answer that one a little bit more better, yeah.
Okay, well left. Because viewers, in this last 10 years, a term came up, which is bandied about quite often. It's called Lutyens ecosystem, the Khan market gang. And this is a term that came into play. I think it was used by the Prime Minister, or perhaps it was co-opted by him in some interviews he gave, in fact, one to me in 2019. Now, Mr. Sarsabudde, there is a feeling that the Prime Minister, as I just sort of asked that question, I mean, is this feeling something that is tangible, or is it just a way of differentiating yourself?
Can I take 5 seconds? Because Rahul,
Okay, no, I
Vinay
think
so
it is-
sorry.
Okay. Go ahead, Dr.
Yeah,
Ranganathan. Go ahead.
because you mentioned the Lutyens, because you mentioned and I wasn't getting the
Oh, come on.
the-
I've been dancing around it, and finally I said, okay, let me just throw it out there.
So
Yes.
I think now I get your question, and I would say, I dare say, this is almost certainly self-inflicted by Narendra Modi,
Okay.
because I don't give two hoots for this so-called Latvian system. There are a bunch of no-goers and chauthi fail. He possibly is looking for validation from the wrong quarters.
Okay.
I mean, you criticize NYT all the time, and then he goes ahead and writes for them.
Okay.
This is the kind of problem that he faces, but it is self-inflicted.
Okay, self-inflicted. Mr. Sarsabudde.
Well, I see a point in what you are suggesting, because most of the Lutyens or the established Chatterati, the class people as you are referring to, are happy to be continuing as prisoners of their own prejudices. They are still not ready to free themselves from the prejudices that they have so fondly kind of nurtured within themselves against Prime Minister Narendra Modi right since when he was the Gujarat Chief Minister. And therefore, they need to be more open-minded. The liberals are unfortunately very illiberal when it comes to Prime Minister Modi and accepting whatever he has done and the kind of success and the renewed mandates that he had secured all along during the last more than 15 years. And therefore, I believe it is basically for these established classes, and you rightly pointed out, Prime Minister Modi himself had described himself that I continue to be anti-establishment, and he was referring to these classes as the establishment, which maybe one can doubt or one can debate about.
Okay. Mr. Verma, why do you think the Prime Minister feels this sort of sense of persecution?
No, I think that the word persecution is far too strong. I think his opponents are feeling a bit of that now. But as far as the Lutyens Delhi Khan Market gang well-coined slogans are concerned, I don't necessarily disagree with them. There was a left liberal lobby. It was powerful in its heyday. Much of what it said was right, and much of what it said was prejudice, and also a consequence of their cultural deracination. They did not have roots in the civilizational history of India. And I think Mr. Modi came as an antidote to them. So in that sense, I am not necessarily saying that his use of labels was wrong.
So do you think, Mr. Verma, he should have
real
reached out?
problem, of course, is
because they always say, and you know, there was, I mean, I don't rate him as much, but you know, he is a bit of an impresario, and he said, and I'm not going to name this person, but he said, oh, you see, the feeling here amongst us is whoever comes to power must also consult us. He has to go through us. We are the interlocutors here, the principal interlocutors. Do you believe that that now has sort of, that's been his mistake? He should have just taken them on, pretended?
I want to say to you, Rahul,
yeah. Invited them for a few dinners.
The liberal lobby has
appointed them on a few panels.
Yes. No.
I mean, that's what they want.
No, not at all.
No?
The liberal, no, I'll tell you, the liberal conventional lobby has weakened itself by its complacency, but not necessarily by some of the qualities it feels belongs to a democracy, although they may not be the most qualified people to talk about it.
It's true.
But that is the debris of the past. Mr. Modi has dealt with them not for 1 year, but for 11 years almost. So let's not just hark back to the past.
Okay.
I think that part is over. Mr. Modi has reached a point where he doesn't need the late Mr. Arun Jaitley to negotiate the broad avenues of Lutyens Delhi. He's a fish in water here.
Okay.
As far as I'm concerned.
But many people
Rahul,
say,
now.
Mr. Verma, that
But
you know,
let
prime
me add
ministers
this.
come and go.
Let me add this lastly. One
system
point
remains.
only. 1 point only.
Yeah. Okay.
He is an exceptionally lucky prime minister because he has had the worst opposition
I think a point that
any
Dr.
prime
Ranganathan
minister
made.
has ever
Yes.
had
Okay.
in a 10-year-old history.
Okay. I have to close this debate. Dr. Ranganathan, final word. Yes.
I'm saying this Lutyens lobby has been made into a Lutyens lobby. It was constructed because people felt it was needed. And I think the great tragedy is, as Pawanji said, element of truth in it, that Modi required Jaitley to negotiate it. One shouldn't have had. The issue that I have with Narendra Modi is, why give credence to these chauthi fails? They are absolutely, and you know, for somebody, for one to say that, look, because these deracinated people had no cultural moorings to India, and Modi comes along and he has, that's why the antagonism. Well, did Sonia Gandhi have cultural moorings to India? Not at all. And yet they were very friendly.
No, but there's a huge difference.
Totally constructed.
She was very much a part of that Lutyens consensus.
Exactly.
But completely different examples there to pick from. But yes, I mean, you could argue the case. And, you know, the reason I sort of brought up this is because I remember the headlines. You know, a person like Mr. Gowda, for example, when he became Prime Minister, or Chandrasekhar. And I think we need to jog our memories back, viewers. They used to be lampooned for the wrong reasons. Even Lalu Prasad Yadav, when he first came in, was seen as this, you know, laughable, you know, so what is that term? You know, yeah, I can't hear you,
Go to an
Mr.
English
Verma.
medium school.
Yes, sorry, go ahead.
I said Atal Bihari Vajpayee was not lampooned.
Yes.
He didn't go to an English
no, but you
medium
know, there
school.
was.
But he
look,
represented
a large
broad
number of people.
consensus.
You know, the fact that he spoke in Hindi, this, that, at that point, sort of, you know, made a few people uncomfortable. You know, they were used to the suaveness of the Gandhis and certain other players, the Gujrats. Anyhow, look, I mean, it is again subjective, viewers. I was only
Gandhis
bringing
were
this up.
hardly strong. Rahul, they
Okay.
are, you know.
Okay, let's say urbane. I'll leave it at this, viewers. This could go on. We could have another 2 hours of a conversation around different aspects of this, but it's been fascinating talking to everyone, and I hope I left enough of a common touch. Thank you very much for watching, viewers, and a Happy New Year.